Fath of Mecca, the conquest of Mecca. And that really was a culmination for us, a couple of months, a couple of weeks, but for Muslims and for Muhammad, a culmination of about 8 years of struggle in Medina. And that's still 13 years, excluding the 13 years of struggle in Mecca. So after a really tough time, the Muslims are back in Mecca. After 8 years of being away from, after the Nabi Muhammad being 8 years out of his city that he was born in, coming back to that city, reclaiming it was a momentous occasion. But moving on from that was not long after does the war get rolling again. So after the whole thing with the Kaaba and Zamzam well, that the responsibility of maintaining the keys to Kaaba and giving the water of Zamzam to the Hujjaj, after that matter was settled. After things kind of calmed down in Mecca, after the people of Mecca, Quraysh, asked, Ya Rasulullah, what are you going to do with us? And Rasulullah said, what do you think I'm going to do with you? And they said, we don't think you're going to teach us what to do. Prophet said, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And no one was killed, no sword was unsheathed, there was no bloodshed, absolutely no fighting on that day, just a total victory. Right? And after that, one of the biggest moments in our history in Seerah, in the year or two that followed suit, that war snowballed, you could say. Because immediately after that, just to give you a sort of perspective on what's going to come up, the timeline of Yazidi. Because when we started, we broke it up into 3 phases. Phase 1 of the Medina phase, of after Hijrah life. That first 6 years was the establishing of the foundation and the strength of the Muslims. Then in the first phase, we had the Battle of Badr and Uhud and Khandaq and Ahzab, which ended with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That's phase 1. Phase 2 was after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when the message of Islam was spreading around the peninsula and beyond the Arabian borders. And then we also found after that the Umrah al-Qadha, which was one of the agreements in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, because the Muslims came in 6th year after Hijrah. Treaty of Hudaybiyah said that they can come the next year for Umrah, which happened the 7th year after Hijrah, the 8th year after Hijrah. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah was broken, and that led to the conquest of Mecca. So now we're looking at phase 3 after the conquest of Mecca. So tonight we'll be looking at the battles of Hunayn and the siege of Ta'if, which happened in the same year that Mecca was reclaimed and conquered back by Muslims. Right? And then next week in the weeks that follow, we'll be looking at the Battle of Tabuk, and then we'll also be looking at the Hajj of Abu Bakr, and then the Hajjat al-Wida, the farewell Hajj of Muhammad, and then obviously we will conclude our Seerah journey with the end of the life of Muhammad in Medina. So there's a lot that happens in that short period after Mecca was taken back. So coming to the Battle of Hunayn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made reference on the Battle of Hunayn. In Surah Al-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in these 2 ayat, لَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَوَاطِنَ كَثِيرَةٍ يَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ. Allah has given you victory in numerous regions, regions. وَيَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ, but on the day of Hunayn, إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْئًا. But on the day of Hunayn, remember your great number oppressed you. But it did not benefit you. It wasn't worth anything to you. It availed nothing. وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ ثُمَّ وَلَّيْتُمْ مُدْبِرِينَ. And the land, the earth, the land that you're in, as spacious as it was narrow and constricted for you. And you turned your back and you retreated. And the ayah follows, ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين. And Allah sent His sakina, serenity, and peace upon the messenger and the believers. وأنزل جنودا لم تروها. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down troops, junud, an army that you did not see. And if you didn't see the malaika, وعذب الذين كفروا, and they punished, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished those that were the kuffar, those that were fighting against Islam and Muslims and Muhammad. وذلك جزاء الكافرين, and that is the recompense, that's what is due to the kafirin. So, as I said, the Battle of Hunayn happened not long after the conquest of Mecca. So, the time difference between Mecca and the Battle of Hunayn was 19 days, just under 3 weeks. Just under 3 weeks for the Muslims to gather themselves and fight in a war. Okay, technically they didn't fight, in the conquest of Mecca. They just took it over completely. And so they, still had the weapons and armory, and horses were kind of ready to go. But in less than a month, they were engaged in another battle. So during that time that the Prophet was in Mecca, during those 19 days, approximately 3 weeks, right? The tribe of Thaqif, they were from the city of Taif, that we didn't remember, and also the tribe called the Hawazin. So Thaqif and Hawazin, these two tribes worked together and they planned to attack Mecca, take it over, take it back from the Muslims, and make Mecca once again the center of paganism and idol worship in the Arabian Peninsula. Like your classic revenge story. But Thaqif and Hawazin, they managed to gather 20,000 people or so to fight the Muslims. And after the Muslims entered and conquered Mecca with about 10,000. A lot of the Quraysh, a lot of the people of Mecca accepted Islam. They were completely overrun and had nothing else to do but to submit and accept Islam. So the Muslims number of 10,000 kind of grew a little bit to now 12,000. So now we have a 12,000 strong Muslim army fighting against a 20,000 strong joint alliance between Thaqif and Hawazin. So Thaqif and Hawazin, Thaqif coming from the city of Taif, remember, they left their homes and they left their women, their children, and their livestock they had, whatever they had, everything they left, and camped all of that stuff at the place that we know as Hunayn. And Hunayn is a distance between Makkah and Taif. And they were led by a young leader. His name was Malik bin Auf, and he insisted, and this is his reason, he insisted that all the warriors, all the fighters for Hunayn and all the warriors for Thaqif and Hawazin, they bring everything that they have to lose. All their family, their life, everything that they possess, whatever they could lose, bring it with them. Because he believed that if they had all of that right behind them, it would encourage them to fight better, because they could see what they were fighting for, in a sense. But there was another guy in the mix whose name was Durayd bin Simba, who was also an experienced war veteran compared to Malik bin Auf, who was a young guy. He discouraged the idea because, if you can see everything you have to lose, you might not want to fight at all. Just run away with everything. As opposed to Malik's idea, if you see everything you have to lose, you fight even harder to maintain. Nonetheless, Hunayn, the battlegrounds of Hunayn is about a half an hour's drive out from the Haram of Makkah. And it's more or less to the northeast of Makkah. So inshallah, when we go to Umrah again, I'll try to do Umrah and the Hajj, we have been, but we can visit these places and stand on these battlegrounds and take in the awesomeness that was of the Sahaba and of the Nabi Muhammad and the history that is in that soil. So obviously, having an army of 20,000 getting ready, that news travels fast in Arabia. And the Prophet ﷺ heard about the intention of Thaqif and Hawazin, and he sent, just let me know, he sent Abdullah ibn al-Aslami to just go verify this information. Because false information during the time of war is a very detrimental thing to receive, but also a very useful tool if you're needing to use it. And that is something that the Prophet ﷺ employed and used when going to the march to take over Makkah from Medina. Because just to go back a little bit, before the march to Mecca, when the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba left Medina, they only knew like 2 or 3 days before the time of actually left. And the Prophet ﷺ sent a couple of spies to the north, you know, like a what's the word? But you know, to give a false impression that the army was moving north, because why would you send spies north except that you maybe want to move north? So the impression was, okay, send spies north, but the real tactic behind it was to give everyone that, you know, that false impression. So the Prophet is aware that these things exist, especially during this wartime, and especially after hearing that maybe there's a tribe of 20,000 that's coming to take over Makkah. So the Prophet, this is the biggest battle to be fought yet. The Battle of Khandaq was 3,000 Muslims against 10,000 of the Kuffar. And then still the battle that happened against the Jews of what was on my tongue? We covered it 2 weeks ago. Khaybar. In the Battle of Khaybar, it was a very intense battle as well. But the Muslims had tactics, they had experienced guys. Now the army is bigger, so there's a lot more inexperienced men as well. So the Battle of Khaybar, they had a smaller crew, but they all fought in the battle against the tribe of Khazraj. They all fought against the Battle of Khandaq. They all had some very good fighting experience. But now with an army of 10,000 men, you know, maybe at least half of them are still new to the fight. It's going to be tough. So the Prophet he borrowed some armor, some weapons, some camels from the tribe of Quraysh. Some were Muslim, some were not Muslim, but because they were living under Muslim rule, they had to oblige, you know, to sort of fund, to sort of support, because the Muslims, yes, were ruling over them, but at the same time, they were protecting them, as we understand a concept similar to what was happening in Medina between the treaty agreement between the Muslims and the Jews. That if the Muslims went to a fight, the Jews were expected to help, and likewise, if the Jews went to a fight, the Muslims were going to help. As sort of a mutual agreement. So this was now the agreement between the non-Muslims of Quraysh and the Muslims, that lend us your camels, your weapons, your armor, and we will protect you. But also, we will return these items to you after the battle, and that was also a promise that was made to them. So the Prophet he borrowed 100 or so suits of armor and equipment from a man by the name of Safwan bin Umayyah. So on the 9th of Shawwal, in the 8th year of the Hijrah, the Prophet with around 12,000 Muslim men, they marched towards Hunayn, which is to the north. Takes you half an hour by car. By yourself, maybe 2 hours walk, or 4 hours, depending on how you like to stroll. But that's with one person. With 10,000 people, I mean, just look at our Cape Town march. To just walk from here to Parliament take a couple of hours. And that's down the road. So now take that same amount of people and walk north for about 30 km. Another story. So this army of 10,000 Muslims, right? Of 12,000. As we said, that 10,000 was of the Muhajirun, those that were from Mecca, that after the 13 years of Mecca, they made hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And that 10,000 also comprised of the Muslims from Medina, the Ansar. And the 2,000 new Muslims that were from Mecca, from the Quraysh. So they left on the 9th of Shawwal, and they arrived at Hunayn on the 10th of Shawwal, and they spent the night there. However, Hunayn was in a valley. And there's lots of hills in Hunayn. And by that time already, the Hawazin tribe, the Thaqif tribe, they had already arrived the night before, and they were setting up camps, setting up spots for ambush, and they took advantage of the terrain before the Muslims could. And so, they were unfortunately ambushed, and there was a lot that was taken from Muslims in terms of, that battle. A lot. In terms of initially losing, because they were ambushed from all sides, stuck in a valley. One by one, they see, okay, there's a non-Muslim popping up, another Muslim, non-Muslim popping up, enemy surrounding them completely. They had nowhere left to run. And so, we can only imagine the state of the Muslims, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the battle in the ayat. The first ayat speaks about the Muslims having this sort of amazement of themselves that they were 12,000. Because not too long ago, 8, 9 years before that, there were only, in the first battle, 313. Only 313. And now, 8, 9 years later, 12,000. And for a number to grow like that, it's exponential growth. And with armor and camels and weapons, compared to the battle of Badr, which had very little of everything, compared to this battle where they had a lot of things. And they've been winning battle after battle. 3 weeks ago, they just took over Makkah without fighting. The week before that, they took over Khaybar, or not too long before that, they took over Khaybar. They defended against alliances in Medina, in the Battle of Khandaq. I mean, they won the first battle of Badr, they haven't lost a single battle since. So, of course, we're going to win Hunayn. They walk in the park as chips. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded them, look, you thought you were going to win. Because you looked at what you had, you looked at your numbers, you looked at the things that you could touch and feel that you possessed in your hand. And you completely forgot that the victory is only granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happened during that battle was, initially the Muslims were taken by surprise, and that surprise grew and grew and grew, and then they realized, oh, we're not going to win this, oh no. And some of them started to retreat. Because there was rumors that were spreading around, oh no, the Prophet, he was targeted, he was attacked, he was hurt. And there was another rumor that spread, oh, the Prophet was killed. And obviously, as anyone in an army to hear your leader has been killed, your morale instantly drops. Your will to fight disappears. But he kept on fighting. Those true believers that were around the Nabi Muhammad that were defending him, those others, all Sahaba. And eventually the tide turned for the Muslims because their intention and their focus shifted. Not from the battle itself, to focusing on the Iman, to focusing on the Nabi Muhammad and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the victory is only going to come from that place, not from their numbers, not from their weapons, not from their horses. That the victory is only going to be granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the moment they turn to the dunya, it swallowed them up. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَرْضِ, and the earth, as wide and as spacious as it seemed, it narrowed on you. It constricted you. When they focused on the dunya consumed them. But the moment they let go of the dunya, and I'm now referring to the dunya aspects of life, the weapons, the numbers of the army, etc. And they shifted to the akhirah, they focused being on Allah and His Rasul. Then Allah, next ayah, ثُمَّ أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ السَّكِينَةَ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ وَعَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this sakina, this relief, this tranquility, this peace. No longer fear of man, no longer fear of losing the battle, no longer fear of losing their life. Because they knew beyond that, they believed that beyond that, once they shift focus, their focus shift, that beyond death is paradise. Beyond death is something much, much, infinitely better to look forward to. And then they won the battle. And it took a lot out of them. Because they're fighting against 20,000 who had ambushed them and had things that they could lose not far away. So they were the Kuffar, they were giving everything into that fight. So the Muslims win the battle, and lots of spoils of this, you know, battle were taken by the Muslims, and these spoils of war were handed out at a place called Ju'rana. And so Ju'rana is a little bit more north, but at a halfway point between Hunayn and Mecca. And so after handing out, the spoils of this battle, of this war, the Prophet ﷺ put on his ihram, went to Mecca and performed a second Umrah. And this was after the Umrah al-Qada. So the Prophet ﷺ arrived back in Medina towards the end of Dhul Qa'dah. Right. So after this battle of Hunayn, and I think next week we might go a little bit more into the Battle of Taif as well. But after these battles, many more of the surrounding tribes of Makkah and Medina, but more particularly Medina, came to accept Islam. Because to hold off an army of 20,000 is not a small feat. To grow an army of 12,000 in 8-9 years is also a miracle. To get 12,000 fighters who would give and have given already everything. I mean, we already know that famous anecdote of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu anhuma, when the Prophet said, "What have you left? Or what have you done for the deen and for his Rasul? Or what have you left for your family?" Then Sayyidina Umar said, "I've given half of everything and I've left half of my family." And Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, "I've given everything and I left Nabi and Allah for my family." So I mean, that doesn't show the dedication of these men to the deen, to following the Nabi Muhammad. And in those 9 years, fighting a battle against the city of Taif and the tribes of Taif who were, good fighters, and that many, the number of them, 20,000. It would be foolish if you lived at that time to still want to fight them. I mean, if you look at the track record, they haven't lost a single battle. They sent letters and invitations to the kings of neighboring empires, the Romans, the Persians, the Egyptians, the Abyssinians. I mean, all that happened in the 6th year after Hijrah. I mean, in 6 years, they established themselves, the Muslims established themselves as a super political power in the region. Different tribes that were completely opposed to the Nabi Muhammad, the message of Islam, and the whole idea, all overnight, one by one. Not necessarily overnight. It took time for Muslims to grow to that point. But they all came from different areas of the Arabian Peninsula to come and accept Islam. And at the same time, the tribes were coming to Medina, to the Nabi Muhammad to proclaim the acceptance of Islam. The Prophet also sent out delegations, sent out Sahaba to different tribes to invite them to Islam. And also sent some of them out to collect the sadaqah and jizya from the tribes that already accept Islam. Because now the Muslims were starting off in Medina, only one city to manage, right? And they had allies with maybe individuals and families that were not in Medina. But after the conquest of Mecca, we now have Medina, maybe the capital city, or Mecca, another capital city, and all the other tribes surrounding those two major centers for communication and trade and human interaction. All the other smaller tribes and smaller villages and cities were now also connected to this, if you want to look at it, Muslim network, this spider web. If we think about it today, in ideally, it's not a perfect world, but Ideally, any Muslim that you greet at the door, Assalamu alaikum, and they reply, Wa alaikum assalam, you are safe in every sense of the word safe by mere fact that they are Muslim and you are Muslim. And that person is your brother in Islam, that person is your neighbor in Islam, that person is your friend automatically. They can be from your street, they can be from your country, they can be from the other side of the world. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. That is a key into entering this Muslim network, this spider web of Islam, which after these battles, after the conquest of Mecca, after the battle, Battle of Hunayn, the siege of Taif, Islam settled down, the dust settled, and the daga was settled. So, well, I don't know, maybe explain what's going on in my head, but everything about the Muslims and the connection with one another was solidified. I mean, it already happened in the beginning, in the first year of the Hijrah, when the Prophet forced his connections between the Muhajirun and the Ansar, that they take them as brothers, and the Ansar give half of everything that they own and share everything. I mean, then already these connections and foundations were set. But now, after the conquest of Mecca, after seeing what the Muslims had done at the Battle of Hunayn, after tribes coming to accept Islam, after delegations sent internationally, you could say, responded and acknowledged the Prophet. For a Muslim to see another Muslim was, as normal back then for us to see Muslims in the Masjid right now. And maybe that's a very poor explanation, but what I mean by that is Islam and the Muslims grew so strong, and the connections with one another grew so strong that they could rely on anyone for anything, that they could depend on one another for anything, that they could look to each other for advice, for guidance, to learn something, to share something, to ask for something. They literally became the Sahaba, a living, breathing, singular organism, one body. As the Prophet said, the Muslim, and I'm paraphrasing, but the Muslims, they are like, my ummah is like one body. If one part hurts, the rest of it feels. And that was the Sahaba. I mean, there's lots of stories and examples that we can take from the Sahaba of the love that they had for each other, of the trust that they had in each other, of the reliance and the depth and the breadth that they would go just to serve one another. I mean, there's that one story of the Sahaba that had such a love and honor and reverence for each other that even if they were walking, example, in the Masjid, and the one went to the right side of this pillar, the other one to the other side, they would greet again when they see each other on the other side of the pillar. Because they said you could have passed away during that time, that second that I didn't see you. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, I think maybe that, because the point of the Seerah, as I say every week, is not for a nice story to tell, or something nice to hear, or something nice to say. But it's for us to, where we can find something that we can implement, where we can find something that we can use to better our lives. Because the Prophet, he is the best of examples, and he was sent as a rahmatul lil alameen, he was sent as a mercy. Mercy to al-alam. It's not restricted to anything, which means we can use some of that mercy wherever we can fit it into our lives. And I think maybe one thing for tonight that we can just think a little bit more is this connection that the Muslims should be having, especially after they have established themselves in a particular place. Fortunately, I have international friends that had come to Cape Town, and the one thing that they always said was, you would never say that the Muslims are in the minority because of the strong presence that they have in this city that is full of non-Muslims. But you would never say that, because every second item on the shelf is a halal stand, every second road in Buka at least has a masjid, Every suburb has somewhere where you can make salah. Every street corner you'll see someone wearing a kufiya, or you don't have to travel far to find someone to say assalamu alaikum to. You know, hear anything other than assalamu alaikum if you're walking 10 minutes, wherever. So the presence of the Muslims in this city of ours was established not by us, but 300 years ago by our forefathers like John Guru, Sheikh Yusuf, and the rest of them. Allah grant them high praises in Jannah for the efforts. Ameen. So for us nowadays to, in a way, forego that legacy, give up on that connection that we should be having with each other, for us to leave off that foundation that they had set all those years ago, and to lose it simply because of the very fact of not connecting with one another. In the same way that the Sahaba were connecting with one another as soon as they were established and had a foundation to stand on. It's a very tragic thing. And that's just looking on a micro level. You could go even smaller and look at how families, disconnected from each other because they simply don't communicate, don't connect, don't make that effort to maintain those relations. When on a macro level, tying back with our brothers and sisters in Palestine, we've known that they were fighting for so many years, but only when it's really bad and potentially on our doorstep, because now this Israel country is not country, but the idea of the people of Israel is attacking other countries, Iran and Jordan, for example. Now we want to do something about it, or a year after it's really bad. I mean, who's to say it's bad now? It was always bad. But the connection that we had as Muslims globally, I mean, that was there since the time of the internet. As soon as the internet came, we could speak with someone in Mecca, we could speak with someone in Malaysia, we could speak with someone in England, with Russia, China, wherever. Brazil, doesn't matter. So the connection of the Muslims should have grown further than what we could have possibly imagined to have here on our very own doorsteps. And we could have had our own conquest of Mecca, Fatih Cape Town, Fatih Joburg, Fatih Durban in South Africa. Just completely taken over these cities because economically maybe we have a little bit of those stamps on the shelves. Maybe that's the illusion. And we think we have taken over. We think we have established ourselves just because we see the star in the moon. Star in the moon doesn't mean anything. How are you going to speak and treat your next person as a Muslim? That means something. But the halal business is another discussion for another day. So, inshallah, I know I've gone on a tangent, but inshallah, we can think about these battles that the Muslims had fought from Badr up until now, Hunayn and Ta'if, and how the Muslims steadily grew and improved as a community and improved as individuals. I mean, Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu anhu, great man, absolutely one of the most amazing. But it took him years to become a Hafiz al-Quran. And we may be putting pressure on, okay, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is too long, 5 years, you get out of Hafiz school, Hafiz school. But that's just one aspect. Individually, the Sahaba grew with every year, with every battle, with every thing that they were together in. And because they were in it together, they grew as a community. I mean, this Masjid alone, having to fight off, people wanting to put sanctions on the Adhan. Same thing in Buka for the Muslims across the world, having to fight off the enemies of Islam, especially in Palestine, the Uyghur Muslims in China, what happened in Myanmar, across the world. Muslims fighting Muslims in Yemen, Sudan, and Syria. We shouldn't be having repeats of what Sayyidina Abu Bakr went through when he fought those that refused to pay zakat. We should be beyond that. So inshallah, when we look at this year again, and particularly these battles, and particularly this point that we have reached in the Seerah, where the Muslims have already established themselves and on strengthening their bonds and connections with one another and maintaining it. Inshallah, that's something that we can take home tonight and look and find where can I do better for myself and for my brother or my neighbor or family or not family or friend or someone completely brand new who's still Muslim. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that keeps us together is our Islam. And the only thing that's going to get us into Jannah is the rahmah of Allah. But if you don't believe in the rahmah of Allah, then all is a point. Good luck. But, so at this point of tonight's lecture slash talk, I've run out of saliva in my throat. So if I open the floor for anyone to share anything, any idea, because this isn't your, I hate to have your standard, okay, Sheikh speak, everyone go home after that. Because I know what happens, because I was a student also, still am a student, alhamdulillah. What happens after the class, those discussions really get to the nitty-gritty of the details of whatever was spoken about. Those talks, outside the masjid on the stoop for that extra hour, and the class is only half an hour. That's when the class, the talks in the car on the way home, that's where some of the meat, the lekker stuff lies over there. So if there is anything, I'm not saying people must share, but if there is, it would be, I believe, great benefit to everyone here, inshallah. That's what I'm saying. Oh, it's a specialization. Arabic, Arabic is more my forte than anything else. But yeah, my thoughts on that would be if someone views the Seerah as being um, centered around violence and war and fighting battles and all of those things, then I would say that that person has maybe not realized why those battles were fought. Because you don't slap someone for no reason. You don't look for trouble. No one does. It's not in human nature to look for harm. We, as humans, we don't like pain. We avoid it as much as we can. That's why we invented banana and painkillers. So Most of the battles that were fought during the Prophet's life were in defense, not in, uh, they were not started. Battle of Badr, that was to take back something that was taken from the Muslims. That's taking justice. That's not the Muslims going out to fight someone for the sake of fighting, to force someone to convert. Battle of Uhud, the Muslims were defending themselves because they heard Quraysh were coming. The Battle of the Trench, they defended Medina from an alliance coalition that was literally going out seeking to destroy the Muslims. Then they started to fight the Jews that betrayed him not long after the Battle of against Khazraj. Then the Khaybar, that was maybe one, that was the first battle that was actually initiated by the Muslims. But it was more strategic than anything else. Because they knew Khaybar, as strong as they were going to come for the Muslims eventually. And in wartime, you would take preemptive strikes where you can. But even so, if you look at how post that battle, the Muslims dealt with it was in fair, in equity and justice. And there was even an agreement that we let you till the land, we let you farm the land because you know best how. And in response, and in return, you give us of your crop and profit, but also in return, we will protect you, you know, and come and fight. There was lives to spare and mercy shown. And then with Quraysh, when they've conquered Mecca, no one had intent to kill. Again, now with Battle of Hunayn and Ta'if, 20,000 non-Muslims were gathered to come and attack the Muslims. And no person is going to ever, in the entire lifetime, just let someone slap them. There's a natural reflex for anyone, even a baby, to flinch, to duck, to cover their face. So as, you know, as a community, as an organization, as a group of people, you're not going to just stand and be slaughtered. Most of the battles were fought in defense of Islam. Most of the battles were fought to establish some sort of justice, some sort of law and order. Because before that, people were burying their daughters alive. People were killing each other because they looked at them funny, because they owed them 1 rand, 2 rand, because they lost a bet. Fair and square lost a bet, they were killed. And then as a result from that, families and tribes killed each other simply because of that one fight between the two. So to say that Islam is just centered around war and fighting, you're only focusing on the fights and not what led up to the fight, what happened after the fight, what happened during the fight, or what even the purpose of those fights and battles were for. You forego all of those things. And I don't think that in any right is fair. If someone comes to you in a time of need, you don't reject them, right? But if they keep on coming and keep on coming and keep coming, you're going to get tired. But the point of using that example is if you know why they come, it will be so much easier to give. If you know why the battle is going forward, it will be so much easier to accept. If you know why you're making salah, it's much easier to make salah. If you know why you need to do anything or accept anything, it's so, you know, it's, I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but you can't separate the why from the what. I would maybe say in response to that. What happened? The battle was fought, but why was the battle fought in the first place? If that question is lost, then I mean, why are you having the conversation? You don't want to know why. You only want to focus on the what. You take meaning away from the lives that were even in the battle. You take meaning away from the lives of the people that lived in that time, that lived after that time. Mhm. So there's also another possible response to what Uncle was saying, which is very relevant because I mean, if they were studying Seerah truly, they would be focusing on what was done. They were focusing on the personality of Muhammad Sallallahu because his life and character and everything he said and the way he lived was Islam. But I think to answer maybe another portion of what Uncle was saying, um, if you were looking at the establishment of Islam through those means coming to an area where there were non-Muslims, um, the Muslims fought those that were going to fight them. Number one, I think that Takos was saying, goes without saying for anyone. And also, um, that the establishment of Islam in those various areas and at different times was all relevant or relative to that areas and those times, to those areas and those times. Because if you were to stick with maybe the time of the Nabi Muhammad and Sayyidina Abu Bakr, just that time frame, everyone in Arabia knew about the Prophet, knew about the Quran had been revealed, knew what the message was. And those that fought back were fighting back to kill, to end that message from being spread. So again, it's not that they were seeking to establish themselves. They came and brought the message and they were met with an aggressive resistance. And so they have to respond in kind. Because you can't fight for the flower. You're not going to get anything out of that. But if they were looking outside of that, maybe time frame of maybe Muhammad and the four Khulafa Rashidun, maybe outside of that time frame, perhaps. But even so, I'd say it's a far stretch. Because in that time afterwards, there were lots of disputes between Muslims. Islam was already established, and the disputes were between Muslims. Already believed Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. They already believed that the dispute was between Muslims. Even beyond that, if you're going to say that Islam was created by the sword, you have to then apply that same standard to every other religion out there. I mean, Christianity, for example, the Crusades, that was them spreading the belief of Christianity through the sword, where they slaughtered everyone in Jerusalem, Muslim, Jew, and whatever else. And that's way back then. And even during uh, the more recent history, when they traveled to the Americas and they killed all of those Native Americans, established some sort of religion there, even to the South Americas. That standard of you have fought to establish something, so therefore accept it. That is literally the entire Western world. They didn't fight to establish something, they fought to take something, which is very different, I believe. If you're establishing something, you're putting in a system of sorts that's going to preserve and protect something. If you're fighting to take something, you are draining whatever is there and leaving nothing but, rot and decay and death and worthlessness. Yeah. Well, if you can bring the Injil and you stand from it, by all means, you Ahlul Kitab. We accept you. Yeah. Because then you already have a double standard. And that leads to hypocrisy. You've been hypocritical. And that's my own 2 cents. But yeah. Yeah, no, it's fine. Shukran. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Everything I've said is good and truth from Allah. Anything I've said that's wrong, maybe a dry joke, but not shaitan. Or protecting guidance. I mean, so inshallah next week I'm going to go a little bit more into details with regards to the battles of Taif. I know I skipped out on that tonight. I'm just glad to feel. And then from there we're going to look at those other events leading closer and closer to the end of the life of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you grow and grow and grow, and maybe after that, because I would see that as possibly the end of these lectures and series, of this series. Maybe after that, we can look at the Khulafa al-Rashidun, what happened during momentous occasions that happened during their lifetimes of the Caliphate, and continue growing, inshallah. So yeah, I look forward to next week. And these discussions, love it that it happens in the masjid, but they also should extend into our family homes. Even if it's like a 10, 5 minutes with whomever is awake at night after Isha and something like that. But with whoever was there, just like an idea, pop a question, pop a sentence, or even did you know? And then one thing, did you know that there were 10,000 Muslims that conquered Makkah and 12,000 that fought in the battle less than a month later? I mean, that's just something. And inshallah, because one thing as a, and I would like to conclude with this, of the newer generations that are here in Cape Town, one thing that I always felt ashamed of was not being able to have these sort of discussions when I was younger with my friends, with my family. Because maybe my parents, my uncles and aunts, whoever else, they were able to have these discussions. But like 8, 9, 10 years old can't really talk much because don't know much. You're not interested in listening to the discussion. Because the people that were contributing to the discussion also maybe lacking a little bit more depth and know-how to introduce a 9-year-old into the discussion. And even as a teenager, I couldn't have those discussions with my friends, even though I'm a bit older and I can read a thick book now. So I think if we can get that, cog turning within our family homes and then within our communities, alhamdulillah, the MSA movements in the more recent years have really reformed the Muslim youth and the engagement with the deen. And alhamdulillah, I had an opportunity to be part of that. But the MSA and other youth Muslim organizations can only do so much. I think in these moments and at times like this, if we can extend just a hand into our family and pull someone with us into these discussions, that effect would be like that stone thrown in the pond and having that ripple spreading further. Because now you connect with your son, he connects with his friend, he then connects with his father, who connects with his friends, and that spreads again like that spider web. That foundation of Islam growing through its connections. But I think I've around the time, alhamdulillah, so Allah again guide us and protect us and grant victory like the Fatah of Makkah to our brothers and sisters in Palestine and anywhere else in the world that the Muslims are suffering. May Allah ease their pain, ease our fears. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Allah